So you want to work in big tech companies like Google and Facebook, or create your own startup like Airbnb and Instagram? OmniQuotient is here to help. OmniQuotient is an online learning platform where you can learn something new from prominent developers every day while creating meaningful connections with them. Just go to omniquotient.com. Follow the topics that you want to learn and the developers you want to learn from. Share your tips and tricks in coding and interact with other developers. Join the OmniQuotient community today.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Good evening, Bert. Good afternoon.
Good evening, Jerm.
How are you? How was your week?
I am. It was a crazy week. Very
Really?
busy week. But I'm happy that it's a weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough week for me as well. I think more than work, it's really more people work. I guess this past week, no, it's communicating with the team, my one downs, no, and yeah, it was a people week for me. Like talking to a lot of people one on ones, which is interesting because tonight, no, what we're planning to do tonight is that we've actually asked you guys in advance, right? If you have any questions for us to answer as CTOs, and you guys actually showed up, right, and gave us a few questions already, and I think Lenly and Krisha would be flashing them in a while. But I think what we're trying to do also tonight is that if there are any live comments or questions, we would deal with those. So for those of you who are hanging out with us tonight, if you have any questions about career, technology, CTO, business in general, I guess, or if you're curious about something with me and Albert, you guys can
Yeah.
ask away, and we would prioritize that over the questions that we actually solicited from you guys din naman, no, from the past week. So yeah, what do you think about this episode, Bert? Are you excited?
Yeah, I'm both excited and also nervous. When you say ask us anything, you're like also I'm
Oo
wondering
nga,
what they
no?
will ask. So but I will promise to be honest and just say what
Same.
just whatever's already there, whatever I
Yeah.
think of when the question is asked, just I will tell you the truth.
Same here. Candor. Candor is the theme for the night. So, siguro while we're waiting for the guys to, come in to the live podcast, maybe we can flash the first question.
First
Uh,
question. What are the
Ito agad.
I didn't expect this to be the first question. What are the perks of being a CTO? User.
Hindi ako prepared dito. Pero, I guess, uh, is it a perk or is it more like a feature? I don't know. I think the first thing top of my head to answer this question is that you would have had, in my case, and Albert's would be maybe different, and I'm
Yeah.
actually interested
Go
to
speak
hear.
for yourself, Jerb. Go.
So this is speaking for myself and my experience. So before I became CTO, I was a developer, a product manager. So I've had several years bago ako naging CTO, no? And so with that, it came with a lot of experience, no, for me. And that's why I'm more equipped to answer questions from the team or direction, business or technical wise. So I think that's kind of the perk, no? I guess indirectly it's, you get to have a voice because you're chief technology officer, right? And people would listen to you, and so you have to be careful with that as well, no? So it's like your superpower, because you get to decide talaga, no? I mean, you're the chief, in effect. So there, I guess that's the main perk for mine, I guess. Like people listen to you and you have the power to make things happen. And
Yeah.
then for my side, that's backed with several years of experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
How
I
about
think
you, Bert?
it's similar, but I would describe it slightly differently. So if I imagine a company or a team being like a boat, like a ship, right?
Mm.
And CTO is very close to like the captain's role in terms of technology and where you're steering or navigating the technology waters. So the one of the perks of this of being a CTO is you get to look up. You're like in a ship. You're on deck, maybe on like a slightly high point, and you can kind of see the whole horizon and make a decision of where to go. Unlike when you are, I would say like not the CTO or not like main decision maker, usually a developer. You're almost, I would say, like focusing on your work down there at in the bowels of the ship, like inside the ship. And though the work there could be fun, and you're tinkering on things, you don't. When you look up, you see like just the corners of your
Yeah.
territory, so to speak. But when you're a
Yeah.
CTO, you get this much broader thing, which is also scary, right? Like a
Yeah.
sense of
Yeah.
responsibility. You
Forest for
have
the trees, diba?
you see all the opportunities in front of you, and you have to make a decision which one we're gonna take, which one we're gonna focus on, where are we gonna go. And you're gonna
Yeah.
take the whole ship with you in that direction. But seeing all of this, for me, it's like one of the really cool perks of being a CTO, exploring possibilities and saying no to most of them, and picking one.
Yeah, yeah. It's as you get to become a leader, people would naturally expect you to lead, right? And that is kind of your responsibility or perk, if you can call it that, now to
Yeah.
provide direction. Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
like being on control, Jerb?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm pretty decisive
I
and
think it's a perk
yeah.
for us who like being the person like at the end of the ball game, like at towards the end of the ball game, buzzer about to hit the buzzer, right? 10 seconds on the clock. You
Yeah.
want to be the guy with the ball, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to make the
I
final shot.
yeah. I like being clutch. And I don't know. I think this is not CTO anymore. It's really personality, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like it when people depend on me for something, right? And I always really try my best to not let them down. So yeah, I kind of thrive in that kind of environment a little bit. Yeah. So it's
And another thing I think that is a perk when you're a CTO is that, at least for
hello.
me,
Mm-mm.
is that when you're you in a tech company especially, you make a lot of the critical decisions,
Yeah.
but you're not the main person who's fully responsible for the consequences of all those decisions. You know what I'm saying? Like you still have the cover of the CEO, right? But you like,
Well,
you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. Ultimately, yeah, it's like the main the main accountable person is the CEO, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, you get to influence his decision, right?
Uh huh.
I think that's quite powerful. There's a question here in the comments, Bert. How much money do CTOs make? Asking for a friend.
It
Etong
depends.
asking for a friend na to. Yeah, it depends. It depends. I think it depends company per company, I think. But naturally, you would be compensated quite well also because you have to be incentivized as well to make the right decisions, right? So I don't know how to answer this one.
I know how to answer this one. So
Go.
I would say at the executive level, especially at the chief level, right? You're
Mhm.
talking about chief technology officer, chief operations, chief executive. People at this level are usually compensated proportional to the size and revenue of the company. Like, so if you're handling a $1 billion company, you don't expect to be paid as a CTO position the same way you would pay $1 million or $100,000 size company, right? Even
Mm.
though you have the same title, right?
Mm.
CTO. So if it's a really big company, you would get paid much more as a chief of that company than if it was a smaller company. And this is in contrast with you being a developer or a manager or any non-chief technology or non-chief role, non-executive role. Usually the discrepancy between what startups or smaller teams would pay versus bigger companies would pay is not so big, right? In other words, like for example, like a startup of a CEO startup would probably make, let's just say, let's put a number, like $100,000, for example. And if you are the CEO of Google, you'd probably make $100 million. There's a huge difference, right? Huge
Yeah.
difference. But if
Depends. Yeah.
you were a developer in a startup, you would probably make $100,000, for example.
Yeah.
But if you were working for Google, it would only be like, at the very most, you'd probably be like 300 to $400,000 a year at the very most, and that's only times three. You're not going to reach like $100 million, right? Just like the role to role comparison as you move from
Yeah.
a small company to a big company. So that's how I would. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, the other thing is that for startups, different for me, no, because I'm employed, right? But for startups, usually a CTO is part of the founding team, and
Yeah.
so he has equity, right? So they're also compensated that way, right? It's very no, parang performance driven. Kasi if the company does well, then the equity in theory also increases, right? The
Yeah.
equity value. I mean, so yeah,
Also, just maybe food for thought here, random trivia. I think for a very long time in the company, in Symph, in my team as a startup, as part of the founding team, I made the least amount of money, like in terms of salary, compared
yeah.
to developers working in the company.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's just like
Yeah.
that's the way it
Parang
is.
as an owner, it's like your investment to
Yeah, you're the last person to get paid
people.
essentially.
Ayun, guys. Should you be better at the technical side or business side to become an effective CTO? I Do you want me to answer this one first, Albert?
You go.
Sige. I think it's a balance, guys. I think if you imagine a seesaw, right? I think at the start of your career, it would be heavily biased towards technical. Na kasi yun naman talaga yung role mo eh. And your job is really to, as an engineer, is to build things, right? To be in the latest, do our R&D, learn, etc. But as if my side kasi, or my perspective is really on the corporate ladder or corporate side, right? So as you know, rise up the ranks, no? Uh, and this is assuming you would like to follow a leadership track. Kasi some people would also want to follow more an individual contributor, meaning I don't want to manage people,
Hmm.
right? So those things, I think mas magiging technical talaga yon, no? I think magiging head of engineering, no?
Yeah.
But a CTO, you would need to do people
Yeah.
management, right? And aside from that, participate in the business discussions, right? Because the CEO would like to hear your thoughts, no? And if I can share actually something that we practice in UBX, right? Si John, our CEO, always asks for the business impact of anything, right? So if it's, for example, requesting for training for QAs, for example, to be leveled up to quality engineers, automation, etc., or do we want to invest in new tools for DevOps or telemetry, those things, no, security, all of that, as the CTO, I would need to present that, and I don't. And the expectation, and rightfully so, right, is that I don't only highlight the technical benefits, but the benefits for UBX as a business. Now, so I would
Hmm.
have to say, this is the investment amount, this is our calculated ROI or the returns, right? And I would also at times also present alternatives, right? Now, if I look at this particular vendor or tool or partner, for example, have I looked at others, right? So there's that side as well, no? So it really is a balance, and I think ano nga parang lesser, and might be different for you, but for my side, lesser siguro parang 55-45, no? 45 technical kasi that one I'm kind of also very confident with na rin kasi, and I'm always really trying to position myself for with the vantage point na looking at it from the business side. Kasi by default, technical agad yung iniisip ko no? How to implement, is this secure,
Mm.
is it up to date with
Mm.
the latest standard? So I always have to incline myself towards the business side more, and that's how I do it as a chief technology officer. Yan. How about you, Bert?
Cool. Yeah, I like, interesting that you say balance. For me, my perspective is, I feel like the CTO is primarily a business role. At least from my perspective, it's primarily a business role. But in order for you to be a CTO, you need to have two things. First is you need to have a broad, what do you call this, a broad range of knowledge in terms of technology. It's almost like the CEO will look to you and say, hey, this is what we're planning for business, and you totally get it. Like, you're a business person, you totally get it. But then the CEO doesn't know what the possibilities are in terms of technology in how to realize business goals. But you, as a CTO, you understand the business, and then you see all the technology possibilities, this broad range of knowledge. Like, you know the terms data lake, like types of different databases, you know the terms of machine learning, artificial intelligence, like, you know, all different, like a broad range of technologies and what are their applications. So
Mm.
and that's your core differentiator from the CEO, who knows that there's technologies but doesn't know what they are, right? And you, as a CTO, you're kind of like the expert in terms of the variety of technologies and their applications, but not necessarily the expert of how to actually implement those technologies. Like, you
Yeah.
don't, you know that there's Python, and you know the pros and cons of the Python language, for example, you know what's use cases, but you don't necessarily know how to code in Python, right? It's not a prerequisite to be a good CTO, but it's important to really understand that, which
Mm.
which is the broad range of knowledge in terms of technologies. I feel like if you are a CTO and you don't know what are the upcoming trends in technologies, what are the new things, what are the current accepted norms, or what are the things out there that are available, I think you're not doing a good job as a CTO.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
second, I would say is that you
Mm.
should be very, you should be very good in terms of technical understanding of first principles. Like,
Yes.
you understand how computers and technology work, right? For
Mm.
example, like, maybe there's this new thing called artificial intelligence, machine learning, and they say neural nets that comes out, right? Like, neural nets, like, that's a very interesting term. Convolutional neural networks. They throw these things around, right? But at
Mm.
the end of the day, as a CTO, you understand that it's basically statistics, logistic regression, and like,
Mm.
you may not know how to implement it directly, but you know it's like logistical regression with like layers involved. And their
Yeah.
use case for that, therefore, is that it's better for images or better for videos or object detection. And so that's kind of like the use case for that. And you kind of like able to hold hold a conversation with an actual expert in the technology and still be
Mm.
able to have some sort of connection, and you're not totally out of touch, right? That you're
Yeah.
kind of like the bridge between the very technologically focused adept guys and the totally
Business.
business people. Like, you're that bridge.
Yeah. Would you agree that you would have to be like a jack of all trades in a sense, Bert, that you kind of know um not all there is, but I guess majority no or enough no to actually function well about on this job,
Yeah,
like technical side. Would you
yeah. Well,
agree?
the beauty about
Or
technology is that there's first principles, right? Like, once you understand like the first principles, you kind of like are able to reason about all new technologies. Like, it doesn't take long for you to understand a new upcoming technology, because you'll basically
right.
say, ah, okay. So it's basically like a database, but
But
you're clustering it like in
yeah,
clusters. You're
yeah, yeah,
distributing it. Ah, okay, I
yeah,
get. All
yeah,
right, interesting. Like, okay, so now I get it. You don't have to like go to a seminar and like fully like workshop and try to know the
yeah, yeah,
details. Kind of understand it. When you ask, actually, I remember this thing that I'm there's something called, I forgot. I'm not so 100% sure. I could be wrong, but it's something called Radius Report or something like that.
mm,
But basically, they have these four, like, it's a report that I read annually, where they evaluate technologies and they tell you Docker definitely already adopt,
yeah.
things to watch out for, and they keep
Emerging tech, yeah,
emerging tech, and then they list out all these other technologies. So I actually go and immerse myself in that,
yeah.
especially the ones that they say adopt, the ones that are deprecated, the ones that
Same,
are
same, yeah,
emerging.
yeah,
You have to like really keep on the lookout. That's not the
yeah.
only source that I have, but that's one thing that I
Yeah.
remember. Like,
There's a lot like Gartner, right? Those things, marami,
yeah.
marami. Yeah. There's another question in the comments, Bert, comment section. So, yeah, what do you constantly improve yourself as a CTO? Go, ikaw muna.
Okay. As I don't think about it like as a CTO. I think more about it. Like, what do you do constantly improve? as a person, like as a person with skill sets, right? So one, I subscribe to actually multiple learning platforms. Currently, I'll just say it. I have some LinkedIn Learning subscription. I'm also an instructor there, so kind of biased.
Plug.
LinkedIn Learning. I also have a plural site subscription, and so the two things that I actually do is, one is I watch courses that help me with my leadership and people skills. So I go through those courses. I actually have a group that I've done with in Simf, that we do this every lunchtime, where we just watch videos and talk about it. So, but it's about an hour every day. So that's one constant improvement. The second one is I need to also know like the nitty gritty details, because at least from my level as CTO of a startup technology agency, unlike Gerb, no, from like this corporate, mine is like sometimes when there are difficult technology issues, sometimes the only person that they can resort to at the last resort is just me. So I have to really understand some technical things like deeply, like really try to understand deeply. So I also immerse myself in the technologies that we use in the company as our stack. So for example, TypeScript, React JS. I take these courses and I watch them and I practice. Yeah, that's what I constantly do. So mostly videos, consuming videos. Yeah.
Parang
How
ano
about you,
no.
Jer?
I think that's you said at the start, right, na as a person. Yeah, I think the learning part no is always a constant in this space, and actually in any, I think, no, yung, and
Yeah.
much more talaga on in technology space, right? You can't be behind kasi that's why there's a term called legacy systems, right? Those things who are most likely going to be deprecated in the future. So I think that's one. So I agree with what Albert said, but maybe siguro another na lang din para you would have another perspective is um I also do those no videos, and I also listen to, I learn better when there's audio or I'm seeing things rather than reading, no? So I
Mhm.
really stop reading books, but I do subscribe to Blinkist, no? So Blinkist is a um
Ah,
yeah, do you have
summary.
you heard of it? Yeah,
No, I
they
use it
some
every day. Yeah.
yeah. So at the start of my mornings or after our daily stand-ups, I usually listen to a book, no? So Blinkist na book para I can, parang expand my learning, and those things kasi while I'm listening, right? I'm also kind of doing other stuff, right? So I can, and if I need to rewind something, hey, wait lang, hindi ko na masyadong naintindihan yun na, I would just, rewind, no? Rather than, mas nakakaano kasi sa akin yung, it demands more attention for me to actually read books, no? So,
Yeah.
yan, siguro as, parang dagdag na lang din sa sinabi ni Albert. The other thing siguro that I'd also want to add is, I think relating to people is very important as well. So given yung mga technical stuff, and you always have to improve in terms of learning, right? But I think constantly you also have to improve on how to hear people better, no, or listen, empathizing, and yeah, it's always something that I have to, ano, um, I've always like, siguro like at the start of the year, I always think about, how am I to my people, right? Am I inspiring them? Those things. I'm always working on that as well. Aside from the technical matters, yeah, people
Yeah.
side.
Trivia that we'll share. Actually, this CTOs discuss thing is this podcast, this live stream thing is actually a Gerb's original idea, where he
Mm.
wanted us to like sort of practice and learn this skill of like, putting ourselves out there and making videos, because in a more consistent manner.
Mm, mm, mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So this is
mm.
one of the ways.
Correct. Si Raf has, oh no, it's different na pala. Si Sean Dominic Abelia. So
Oh.
he asked, actually got accepted to multiple universities abroad. So I'll ask, as if I was in his shoes, what do you think about studying abroad? Is it hands down better than settling for our education in the Philippines? Ah, touchy topic. But I believe that, well, in some schools mas updated na, no? But books in general and a lot of the things that are taught in college are kind of outdated din. So I don't know kasi sa labas, no? But maybe mas updated na sila. Um, I wouldn't say there is an advantage. I guess I think a lot of the important skills or things like what Albert mentioned na yung first principles design, um, the subjects that are taught. Ang problema ko kasi 10 years ago na ako guys eh. So
Yeah.
'di ba? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
2010 was when I graduated college, right? So if the curriculum did not improve since then it's gonna be a bad investment, I guess. Parang
Yeah,
you'd rather be learning faster online. Baka hindi siya nagmamatter actually. What do you think about this, Bert?
actually, I think
I think I need
about
to
this. That
think
you're
about
right.
this
Actually,
more.
when it comes to education, just actually learning, I think it almost doesn't matter anymore. Whether it's abroad, whether it's here, because you will have to do it online anyway. Like you have to learn online. But this is strictly speaking in terms of like just education and learning, like just content and material. But
Mm-mm.
university is not just about that. University is about making friends, making connections, the
True, true,
people that
true.
you meet, and then it opens up job opportunities for you as well. Like the reality is there are a lot of companies that select for education for university. Like we'll only get the ones will buy us for people from Stanford, from Harvard,
True,
whatever.
true.
Versus like
Meron
there
ngang
is just a
marami.
reality like that. So if you ask me, a straight art comparison, the fundamental truth is there are already, I would say, like gravity centers, right? Like I would say, like Stanford, for example. Stanford is very well known because it's well known. It attracts
Yeah.
better professors. If it attracts better professors, it also attracts better students. And because they have better students, it also creates a much better experience in terms of interactions that you have. Because there's better people there from all over the world, you have a more diverse and more, like the concentration of like high quality is just so much more in schools that are statistically more famous or more known for their the quality or
Yeah.
their
Like
graduates and their
MIT,
stories, right?
Harvard. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
it's really it's really just like it's like that. It's just a fact, right? And then also like Google is nearby Stanford, so their Mountain View office at least their
Yeah.
headquarters. So if you want to get into Google, like the chances increase if you're from Stanford, and
Yeah.
if you have like a Princeton University in your resume, things just open up for you more than if it was some other university that like from a US perspective. If you're applying to a US company, you put in
Yeah.
there, for example, University of the Philippines, and I know Sean comes from there, and versus you put something like Stanford University. Like just the fact of familiarity, and if like all things being equal, people will have to decide which someone they will pick, right? Like this person is as good as this other person, so how will I choose? Well, let's look at their school. Oh, okay, I'm not familiar with this one. Okay, so let's go with the Stanford one. Like
Yeah.
it's like that. So
Parang
I think,
stamp, no? Parang it's like a brand. Parang you got through the training of Stanford, MIT, all of those things, and
it's a
parang
branding thing, right?
it is, yeah. But
Yeah.
the reason why I was parang thinking about this, and I asked you nga what you think, no, is that I think more and more, no, companies are also less depende talaga sa goal mo eh. I think if you want to be exposed to different cultures, no, you're sanay na here in the Philippines because learning's not just the school, right? It's also
Right.
the environment and
Yeah, yeah.
the people you're with. So international schools or working universities abroad, ibang culture, no? So you get to learn other things as well over there, no? So but if yun nga, if your goal is to like land a job, I think magmamatter lang siya on your first job eh. After a while, and
Yeah, yeah.
even even ano pa nga, like after even before your after your first job, I think more parang experience and your prowess na no. Like a lot of like us now when we do interviews, we actually ask you to do some coding or ask you about technical stuff. Those di na kami masyadong nagpapake about schools actually. Like it's he's from ganito. Parang it's a nice to know, but most of the time actually you'd be surprised. We actually hire from less known schools or even non-graduates kasi mas technically sound or
Yeah,
updated sila.
yeah.
Yeah.
When it
Yeah.
comes to just like learning how to code, I don't think you even need to go to school.
Yeah.
Like you can
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
do that like just on your own self study. There are materials already online. Like you can just do that. Yeah. So you have to think about your goals, right? Like if you
Yeah.
want to have a diverse network, that's gonna be very difficult to do if you're not gonna go to a
In the
school, at least
Philippines.
initially, right? So
Yeah.
if so, my just advice: if you get accepted into multiple universities abroad, I mean, the fact that you applied, you already know the answer. Like, go ahead and do that.
Yeah. Yeah, totoo.
Okay.
Magkakaroon lang ng ibang perspective rather than staying in the Philippines. What's the one thing that makes you love being a CTO? Ah, I think for my part, it's like every time something goes to production, no, like you know, that to me is like the best feeling. Na a few months back or a weeks back, it was just on paper or a PowerPoint. It was just a plan, right? And when it gets to production, it's like, dude, what we were planning, we built something, right? It's
Yeah.
the joy of creating something, I guess, is what I really love about my job. So that's for me. Yeah, simply.
I would agree. Very similar to me. It's when looking back at the decision that you made and then realizing that we got where we are right now, which is supposedly like a successful thing, right? Like
Yeah,
when you, because the decisions that you make as a CTO, you will feel its impact many months, maybe even years down the line. So you only feel the joy of making the right decision like months or years down the line. So it's when you look back, like, I'm so happy we did that. Like, I'm so happy that this is where we decided to do this. So happy we decided to invest in Bitcoin. I wish. But like back in 2010. But
yeah,
that's kind of the things that you love.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love.
Yeah, I think I also like with the guys that I work with, they really like when what they've built is also being used by people, no, hindi lang yung ginawa lang for because it's cool. Those things give back a lot to us, no, as devs and engineers, I guess, in general, no, na you see na meron kang ginawa and ginagamit siya. And it's I can recall a few moments in my life, I guess, na sobrang ano niya, parang high. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Ano to? Tabs versus spaces, Vim versus, ay nako, ito, Vim versus VS Code. I don't know. Ikaw, Bert, tingin mo dito. I think masyadong
I,
personal, ano to, personal preference.
at our level, usually we don't anymore
Yeah, bother.
talk about this. I think where I would say we would discuss would be something around um, no, because these are preferences, right? And you would need
Yeah,
to, when you want consistency generally, when in a team, you want consistency. So understand why there might be like battles like this or debates. And it's good to have the debate, but not good to have it too long or else you're wasting time. So it's like disagree and commit. That's one for trivial matters like this. But what I would say is like where debates usually happen that it's relevant for a CTO would be like, hey, should we invest more into Python developers or JavaScript developers?
totoo.
Right?
Oo.
Like
The
what or
stack.
.NET or yeah, what stack are we gonna pick? And it's not
Yeah.
about like it's this time because I feel like tabs versus faces, Vim versus VS Code. These are feelings, right? These are preferences. The debates that we have at the CTO
Quality of
level
life.
are more objective, less subjective, are more like you have pros and cons that you weigh,
Tsaka
and you
more
try
strategic siya than
yeah
tactical,
and you say like
decisions.
yeah, like it's not about my preference. Like I might want Python because to be honest, I grew up with Python. But
Yeah.
if JavaScript is what will get us to where we want to go,
Mm.
then we're picking that. That's kind of like like for example, before the reason why I say I grew up with Python because initially Dave and I, my CEO, my partner and CEO, he's like Ruby on Rails. This was like
Mm.
10 years ago, 12 years ago, and then me,
Yeah.
I was kind of no Python, and I kind of also know Ruby on Rails. So we were thinking, what should we do? What should we focus on? And so we were really tempted to take on Ruby on Rails because there were no Python developers that much in Cebu yet.
Yeah.
But then we actually looked around and we made a conscious choice to go with Python. And the reason we decided to go with Python was because we had so many friends who also ran agencies and most of them were Ruby on Rails. And we didn't want to compete with our friends, right? Like I'll have want to hire somebody, and it's like my friends like also try to hire like it's gonna be a mess. So we decided nobody's doing Python. Okay, we will do Python. We will focus on Python, and because also Python is easy to teach, it's easy to
Yeah.
learn. And so
Yeah.
let's focus on that. Let's just train it up. So we were able to create this niche of developers that, it was easy to recruit. We weren't competing so much against our friends who were doing
Yeah.
PHP, Ruby on Rails, .NET, C Sharp, the very common ones. And that's kind of like how we differentiated, and we were able to operate in Cebu effectively. So see, it's a
Correct.
strategy thing.
Marami nag-affect din sa mga like bigger decisions, right? Like sometimes kasi it becomes like a religion, right? Like R versus Python or
Mhm,
AWS versus Google. I
mhm.
think in some cases these things are quite competitive, and you're right, no? Like what you said kanina, Bert, na you disagree and move on.
Mhm.
And that's where, yeah, as the CTO, you get to really call the shot.
Yeah.
With everybody else, there's the madcom or the leadership group, if ever. Ano ba to? Does being a CTO also require you to be capable of being a backup CEO in your respective companies? Oh yes, yes, it is. Yeah, down
For
to the. I think for my case, down to the administrative stuff, right? Like if our CEO is, like on leave, I am the one that actually approves the transactions, for example, mga ganon, and yeah, something like that. But in some parang business decisions talaga na malalaki talaga, and I remember si Jeff Bezos, meron siyang article na merong mga decisions that you can actually, you know, not spend too much time with. If you commit a mistake, then do the other,
yeah.
right? But for bigger ones, I think it's more than just the CEO that actually decides nga. It's everyone's like a backup of everyone in our company. Parang there's a mancom, and that committee actually hears out everybody. No, and if there is a paano ba, like 50-50, then the it's the onus is on the CEO to actually decide whether it's left or right. Those things. Parang you contribute to the decision making. Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Bert?
Definitely. So my initial answer actually, while before you started speaking, I was gonna react right away of saying like, I think no, because CEO is like there are a lot of other parts of the business that CTO in a tech company sounds very broad because in a tech company most of the stuff are tech. So you are the chief technology officer, so you kind of like this huge domain that you own. But in a company, there's also like finance, there's sales, and the CEO usually the one overlooking all those things along with the COO. There's other aspects of effectively running a business that a CTO is not primarily responsible for and might not even be responsible for at all and would not be the best person to actually make decisions for that.
Decide.
Yeah. But after I listened to you, I realized you're actually right. And I think the reason why is because nowadays everything technology has it's so
It's in
ingrained
everything.
in
Yeah.
everything, right?
It affects
Like
sales,
mhm,
marketing, customer
operation.
support,
So even the
operations.
decisions of like what kind of technology to build your marketing operations on top of in your sales operations and
Yeah.
everything, the CTO kind of has a say, and not only
Mm.
has a say, but it actually has to be aware of these decisions. So now the CTO is kind of like really involved in everything. So yeah, now in that context, it does make sense actually. So yeah, that's a pretty good observation, Sean.
Good question. Wala na ata. This is Combine versus VS Code and Vim. Ano
Just
na to
combine it.
kanina? Oo,
Yeah.
i-combine na lang daw. Siguro hugot tayo from the questions that we had
There you
prior
go.
to live.
What's the one skill that people often
Ikaw
neglect
muna,
but
Bert.
is
Ikaw
very
muna.
important? Oh, okay. Okay, what's the one skill people often neglect? But this is I will answer this in a technology perspective, especially because a lot of technology people are, I would say, maybe introverts. Don't really want or like talking to people. But I think communication is so important. Not just in technology, but even more in technology.
Hmm.
Techno- Communication is very important, and the one skill that I think within the subset of communication is to actually be able to understand where a person that you are talking with, for example, I'm talking to Jerb. No, maybe not. I'll talk to Jerb CEO, right?
Mm,
John. And I'm talking to him. It's very important to understand his context, what he knows, what he
yeah.
understands before I open my mouth. And the reason for this is like this. For example, what if John asks me, "Hey Albert, how's your projects?" And John, the CEO, UBX, asks me, "Albert from Synth, how's your projects?" I then go on, "Oh yeah, our projects actually doing quite well. Like there's one project where we're doing React and we're implementing hooks, and it's latest and greatest technology in like React. Like the hooks, like it's very cool because you don't need to use class components anymore. It's like this functional components thing innovation in React." And right there, guys, I just lost John. Like John just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's not what I'm asking. Like at his context, a CEO guy asking me how's your projects. The one thing that he wants to really know, what he's really asking there is like in a big picture, like how's your projects? Like don't go to like the deepest realms of React, right? Just say like
Mm.
so
Full
I would
details, bro.
yeah, like the way I would understand like how's your project, I would say, oh, our projects, you know what, it's doing pretty well. We're hitting about 95% success rate. There's about 5% that's delayed or kind of like in trouble, but
Mm.
otherwise we're doing good. So like they'd be like, oh, that's pretty cool, you guys have an interesting success rate. So we have a conversation at that level. Likewise, if
Yeah.
I'm talking to a developer says, "Hey Albert, like what are you guys how's your projects?" I'm like, "Oh, we're very busy, we actually need developers right now. You know what use technology we're using like this cool thing called React, and it's like we're testing out this there was this Redux and there's this new one. You know Redux, right? Or do you know Redux? What do you use actually?" So it's like understanding where the other person is coming from is a
Mm.
really important communication skill because it allows you to communicate through different levels. And I say this because until you learn how to communicate into another layer or to another level of abstraction of like level 10,000 altitude view, 5,000 feet altitude view, when you go into the details, you will not be able to to navigate the career ladder. You will not be
Yeah.
able to also communicate well with people, and
Yeah.
you will always be abstracted away by another person who can communicate in that way.
Yeah. And I think as CTO, you
That's what
get
we know.
to, oo, parang you get to really adjust kasi it really
Yeah.
matters who you talk to. No? And
Yeah.
effective communication is knowing your audience, right? Who
Mhm.
you're talking to. So that's very
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me naman,
So
I think this is for those that are um not at the CTO level siguro muna, no?
yeah.
At maybe junior, mid-level, senior engineer, or actually kahit hindi IT profession. I think everyone has to give importance to the skill of managing up. No, kasi people always think that um as I get to learn how to manage people, those that are people that are reporting to me lang. No, it's more important actually for your team to actually manage up as well. No, that's as important then. Kasi it's not, and ang naiisip kasi ng mga tao bigla, it's like sip-sip, no, or you're parang politics, parang masyado kang mapolitika or something like that. I mean, that's probably like the extreme of it, right? But I think as a leader or manager or even as an individual contributor, um the ability or the ano ba, parang yeah, I think ability or skill, no, to say na no, this is what I think, or voice out, or it's as important and ang sa akin now, as like, let me put it in a example siguro. So as a CTO, I don't like my people to be yes men, no? Parang lahat ng sabihin ko gagawin na lang nila, no? I would
Mhm.
like to hear their opinions, no? And I would want them to tell me, no, na hey, Jerb, punong-puno na talaga, no? Or the people are quite tired. Or if, for example, the venture leads, because I also participate in our business discussions kasi talaga heavily, Bert. And like, if there is like, hey, what if you do this or what if you do that, right? I would appreciate if the venture lead or the product owner would say, na, no, actually, boss, I hear your opinion. I get what you're saying, but based on market feedback and our users, I think this is the one that we should prioritize. I think that's a good idea, but we'll take that into consideration. But for now, we're quite firm about our priorities for the business, no? So something like that, no? Parang as an example. Kasi di pwedeng puro ka lang yes, no? Kasi or
So the ability to say no nicely or like
that's
effectively.
that's part of it, but it's really
Yeah.
dealing with the upper management, 'di ba? Hindi
Uh-huh.
porket highest paid people or yung hippo, highest paid people's opinion. I hate that, no? You really have to, kind of ano ba? Manage talaga sa taas din, no? It's quite important for your team, no? Parang managing expectations, all of that. So that's very important,
I
especially
like
in
managing expectations.
the corporate setting as well, no? So actually kahit sa startup siguro parang you need to interact as well with the leadership team, give your opinion, yeah, and I think as leaders we also appreciate that better than sure boss or yes Bert, automatic, no? Parang ganon. Yun.
Got it.
Junior, middle, senior. Does do these reflect your capabilities of the amount of experience? Can you have an introverted senior developer who can't lead a team just because of his what do you think about this one, Bert?
So I mean, this actually is. These are so these are supposedly like relative terms in a team, right? Meaning like this person is my junior, this person is my senior. For example, like let's take this in school, right? Or like once you graduate, right? Once you graduate, you're done with school, you enter into the workforce. You're 2 years of experience there, and then there's somebody who comes in and they just have 1 year, like they just freshly graduated out of school, and then they come and work. Usually in other industries outside of in IT, usually they will say something along the lines of, oh, this example, I'm the one who's older, right? Example, you're the younger one, I'm the older one. Usually I will say, oh, Jerb, yeah, he's my junior. And then you will then say, oh yeah, he's my senior, Albert's my senior. And it's really a relative term. And I think where there's confusion is because we're applying these relative terms across different teams and trying to standardize it without actually having basis. So this, for example, like I would say, like a junior developer in say Google could be very different from a junior developer in Symph, or even a senior developer in Symph could just be
Yeah.
a junior in some like Chinese company that's super
Yeah.
advanced. So it's really it's different from company to company. So I
Yeah.
guess
And
do these yeah.
go ahead, Bert.
So do these reflect your capabilities or the amount of experience? I think it's well, I would not say experience or
Yeah.
capabilities. I would expect I would rephrase it as impact. Your ability to provide impact, because you could have like a lot of experience and not have a great impact. And I wouldn't, in this case, I would say like some other people would be your senior in terms of impact.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are people who have a lot of skills and they're just very young in terms of experience, and they could have bigger impact. And then I would also say this person could be more senior in terms of impact, right? So can you have an introverted senior dev who can't lead a team just because of his or 6 years of experience? So I don't see the title senior dev in this question. I would see, can you have an introverted dev who can't lead a team? Yes, you can have like that introverted dev who can't lead a team. Yes, and then they have 6 years of experience, but there's a missing question. There's a missing part here. Like, do they know? Like, do they have skills? Do they have good skills?
Yeah.
So then I would see that person as they are, right? Like it would be difficult for me to say this person is a senior dev and they don't have the skills to have an impact. Now, if they is it possible for a senior dev who's really good at coding and having an impact and has lots of experience but cannot lead a team or don't doesn't want to lead a team? Definitely,
Totoo.
definitely.
Yeah. I think
Um, yeah.
with us, no, when we came up with our like career progression framework, we actually asked the developers as well kung parang how do we structure this, no? Kasi we're aware that some people would be introverted, right? Like they would rather be given tasks and deal with the deliverables rather than
Mhm.
dealing with people. And so in ours, Bert, we actually like have a individual contributor track now where
Mhm.
you are kasi in most companies kasi like by default when you become a senior engineer, people report to you. So in ours, no, we know that for a fact and we don't want that to happen kasi in our case parang well based on the feedback as well from the devs, no, gusto ko magpo-progress pa rin ako sa career ko but as an individual contributor, so there's like L1, L2, L3, L4 level IC, and those would have its own perks, right? But there's also like a leadership track where it requires a little not a little but a certain level of individual contributor skills, no, like what you said, no, you kind of know how things kind of work. You have some expertise in some things, but mostly you're there to provide impact or value by managing people. And nagba-branch out talaga siya eh. Kasi yung isa, mas hindi siya magiging expert on Python, right? He would, so if I was a senior or a manager, nandun ako sa manager track, I would consult on our Python expert or React expert. Kasi siya naman yung nagpili na I would rather deal with the individual skills, no, and
Yeah.
being an expert with one thing. The other naman is I would want to mentor or coach or manage people, right? And
Yeah.
to us, those things are actually branch talaga siya, no, nagba-branch out, and we need not force people to actually manage people just because senior engineer na sila. The other misnomer is that automatically if you're 10 years senior ka na, hindi. Kasi marami kaming na-interview or nakilala na matagal na sa field but their
Mhm.
tech stack or their know-how is just not what we want, no, or not up to date or doesn't parang it doesn't fit our requirements for mid-level or senior engineer, for
Yeah.
example.
And this is actually the reason why in Civ it took us a long time before we even like for the longest time we didn't have roles. Like we just called everybody like developers.
Yeah.
And we didn't have like this ranking thing because that one I had a difficulty like reconciling how do you label people, like is it like by experience and all these things. It was quite difficult.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've noticed is that okay, what do you do in this case where um like somebody who is really skilled is not managing people, right? And then there's somebody who is not as skilled in coding,
Yeah.
and but then is really is managing people and is good at managing people, and they get paid the same, or do they get paid the same, or do they get like how do you handle those kinds of things? Because people attribute value to like pay, right? Like how much value am I providing? And I think that there is this what do you call this, there is this maybe preconception that if a person is less technically skilled than you, then they should be paid less.
Hindi eh. Kasi
Yeah.
depende talaga sa impact mo nga, like what
Uh-huh.
Albert said, no?
Yeah.
And the reason, yun nga, that's exactly the reason why we said that there is like somewhere in your career as a developer, in our side, in UBX, there's like a fork, no? Na you become an individual contributor and those certain levels would have its own pay range, right? And on the other side naman, manage M1, M2, M3, M4 would have their own parang pay range, no? So doesn't necessarily mean na hey, I'm more technical than you, then I should be paid more kasi ang value ko sa kanya, like Albert, let's say Albert is one of our senior engineers and he's a tech lead, meaning he's leading people. Ang value ko sa kanya is um employee engagement, right? Like managing the team's workload, right? Making sure that the design is is good, for example, right? And I would even have a KPI or a key performance indicator na did you like your decisions kasi would always impact business, right? And you as a tech lead, you always have to talk to your product owners or venture leads sa business side naman about things, no? Para kang mini CTO in effect, no? For a
Yeah.
specific project or venture. So you're rated differently versus an individual contributor kasi yun mas parang plainly, hindi naman plain, but it's the user story production, no, how much like quality of your code, for example, R&D, those things, no, very different ano siya, expectations and different impact as well. Now, depending na on the company which they would provide premium to, no, or equal ba? Do we provide more premium in terms of leadership or individual skills, for example? Those things depends and contextual siya. Iba-iba
Yeah.
yan per company. Yeah.
So could you have a situation where you would have a mid-level developer being a tech lead of a project, leading a individual contributor, senior dev?
Sa amin, oo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they know naman na as senior individual contributor level, no, my task is to be a part of that team, no, and the expectation from the tech lead is that you'll be able to produce more kasi or guide the people more in terms of parang technical know-how rather than coaching and managing them. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for asking
Yes.
that, Sean. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, good question.
What defines impact? What is a sample metric for impact?
E.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I it backfired on us. My definition. So impact is primarily a business thing. It's primarily a business thing, and it's measured across many. It's like asking how well are you doing marketing, right? Like you gotta look into brand awareness. These are difficult to measure sometimes. Brand awareness, campaigns, but in the context of technology, what is the sample metric for impact for devs? You would say like um, project delivery. Like, did this person contribute to getting a project delivered on time?
Yeah.
That's one. Number two, has this person enabled others to, to then as a team be able to deliver on time because this person helped other people? I like it's like a tech lead slash like helping out others. Then your impact easily multiplies in that situation. So not only are you contributing personally and adding, you've now become a multiplier because of you. Other people are also now able to contribute more or unblocking them so that they can actually contribute at all. So that's like an easy way to measure impact. So when I look at a person, I ask myself, what is this person's impact? I would usually ask those two things. One, is this person delivering on their own? So that's adding. And number two, is this person helping others also contribute more? That would be like a multiplier, right? This person's a multiplier. And then there is this third category, which I is like the stuff of legends, right? It's like, are you like an exponential factor? Right? Are you an exponential, meaning like there's this person, like what they contribute is just so brilliant.
Yeah.
Maybe they reorganize a team dynamic or they create software that somehow allows you to go 10 times more
Yeah.
productive, right? Like as the whole team and unlock value. These ones are the stuff of legends. This is like Jeff Dean of Google, right? I don't know if you know Jeff Dean. If you don't know Jeff Dean, look him up. So that's like
Yeah.
the stuff of
Yeah.
legends.
May mga ganun talaga eh. Like there are certain talents that are catalysts, no? Like you would observe that if they are in, let's just say, no, parang hindi naman sa ano, but parang sakto lang na level na performance na team and you add this person, it's like he's a catalyst or he or she
Yeah.
is like a catalyst, and it's observable but hard to kind of track, I guess, no,
Quantify,
parang
right?
oo, no, mahirap siya eh. Kaya meron talagang subjectivity when it comes to performance rating, and I generally trust my tech leads to do that, no, kasi they're in the trenches, right? Hindi ko naman kilala kung sino yung mga catalyst sa mga teams talaga. Like I know some but not everybody because I'm not with them daily, right? Impact siguro, I think ano din kasi, naging factor sa amin, Bert, nung simula kasi na when people are not receiving feedback or they don't know how they are measured against like other people, no? And like, parang ultimately kasi ano siya parang pupunta siya sa parang meritocracy, parang how can I know if I'm performing well, etc., etc. So,
Mhm.
yun, maybe these things no would come in the form of like feedback sessions, and we do it quarterly for us. So we have paano ba? Let me step back a little bit here. So, si top management, they define the objectives for the quarter, right? And then, so merong objectives, my top 5 priorities, for example, and then the teams would then disseminate that to their teams, no, and they would agree on certain things to track and measure for that quarter that would have impact to the objectives for that quarter, no,
Mhm.
and also parang yun yung magiging basis mo na am I delivering impact, no, na meet ko ba yung objectives na sinet natin at the beginning of the quarter. The other thing then is as an individual, di ba I mentioned earlier we have levels, no? Parang individual contributor or manager. Merong skills and merong parang may 10 levels, for example, na level 4 pa lang ako ngayon. Gusto ko I will work on this particular skill for 2 quarters, for example. Like for example, communication or um uh, uh, yun na lang, wala akong maisip. Effective
Communication.
communication. Effective communication. That's one skill that we actually require. No?
Okay.
So, I would like to improve that from 4 to a 6, for example. No? But, ganun. So, I guess, if you would like a metric, those things could be in a, parang pwedeng gawing formal through parang quarterly reviews or OKRs, for example. Parang ganun. By the way, I've read a comment here and I agree with it. Itong sabi ni Kyle Oropesa, my take on individual contributors is that you still need to handle people, but not at the same level as managers do. I'd say 80-20. I would agree with this, no? Kasi yun nga you're not an island, right? You're always dealing with people. And like what Albert said, no? Are you helping others be better as well? So there's always that talaga And yun nga, I guess depende din per company, no, and how they measure impact or the objectives of the company where they want to steer the company to. Sa amin kasi communication, effective communication, how you deal with others. Are you collaborating with people? That's very important. So as an IC, hindi porket IC ka, you don't talk to
What's
people. No,
IC?
you still
Individual contributor. Okay.
individual contributor. So you really have to meron talaga soft skills kasi you're dealing with people You're not dealing with robots, 'di ba? So yeah, there's always a high touch component to it. And yun nga, depende kung managerial ka, then there's more people skills to learn or soft skills.
All right, just a note here. It's 8:02 and we are going into overtime and it's okay. I think Jerb and I will take on as many questions as we reasonably can. So we'll try to wrap up after we go through most of the comments, if not
Sige.
all.
Sige. Would you like to select one here,
Here,
Bert?
should a dev better be a specialist, backend or frontend or full stack web dev? What's your take on this?
Full stack.
Yeah, full
Si Albert full stack.
Well, yeah, for a company like UBX, as Jerb said, maybe for as well as Symph agency, a small, we are, I would say, relatively smaller companies, we would say full stack. We always go for full stack generalists because the range of our, we only have few people and the range of our problems is diverse. If you want to be a specialist or if you want to go to a company like Google or like Apple or like a huge company, usually they tend to recruit specialists because they have very, very specific problems that need somebody who's got a PhD on something like
Yeah.
specific, like how do you handle database storage at planetary scale, like that one, like, and then you, that's your actual dissertation, right? That's your PhD paper and you get hired for that. So for much bigger companies, specialists are definitely in demand, but for guys like us, we want generalists.
Yeah, kasi parang I guess at some point it's more bang for the buck. I guess as an investment of the company, 'di ba? Kasi full stack na kaagad. He can do back end and front end. But I guess also on our part, we also parang hire specialists. And I think we've tackled this in several episodes back,
Mhm.
no, na depending on who you want to work for, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You could be no, I really want data scientist role lang talaga or data engineer, or I would want to be, you know, very an expert with React, for example, and not
Yeah.
necessarily deal with the other things about and
Yep.
those things. No, so depends. This depends, but in general, you wouldn't make you wouldn't make a mistake, or it's not gonna be bad to go full stack. No, malaki yung demand.
Yep.
Um,
What's your opinion on developers also being called engineers, even
mm,
without taking an
mm,
engineering degree?
yeah. I think ano to eh, like I think in earlier part of this episode we talked about this na I think your university experience matters only up to a certain level. I think a lot of people now have not meron akong kilala magaling na dev, front end siya, and graduate siya ng what's this, parang medrep, basta medical course yung graduate niya. And sobrang galing niya na front end dev. So, he's an engineer, di ba?
Yeah,
Software engineer.
I would say this is more of like, yeah, the person does not have an engineering degree, period, but
Yeah.
the person is doing engineering work.
Yeah.
So in this case, what would you call them? Like, for simplicity's sake, we just call people who do engineering engineers,
Engineers.
right? If they
Hindi
can do
kasi siya,
engineering, we call them engineers.
yeah,
But do they have the official title of the engineering degree? Well, sadly, the
yeah,
way this degree thing works, they don't. So, yeah, then
yeah.
that's
Hindi
the thing,
kasi siya,
right?
wala kasi tayong certification eh. Like for example, structural engineering or civil engineering, 'di ba dapat may license ka, no? In IT, I think we don't. Although meron mga certifications, but I mean, it's like if you quack like a duck, you walk like a duck, then you're a duck. So you're an engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you tackle tech debt? How do you assess if a certain technical debt needs to be paid? And then how do you maintain a healthy level of technical debt? Sige, ako muna sasagot nito.
Closure.
Misnomer siya actually to think that technical debt is bad. Like debt in real life is not also bad, right? Like sobrang daming,
Right.
like the biggest companies also have the biggest debts because they are efficient with the resources, right? Or the money, no? Uutang sila, invest nila to something else, and because they were able to access that money today, and baka the banker in me is talking na here. They're able to access
Mhm.
money today, then they're able to access, parang working capital, right? And so napatayo nila yung bahay, nakabili sila ng kotse for their delivery business. It enabled things to be faster. And if you think of it like that with software or engineering or product delivery, for example, technical debt isn't necessarily bad, right? But yun nga, meron siyang due date, di ba? Parang ganun. Parang, well, in real life, there is a due date, di ba? Merong, and you pay quarterly, depends kung kailan ang parang amortization schedule. But in technical debt, for us, we actually parang sort them, no? Parang may critical, not so critical, no?
That's a good
Uh,
one.
dun mo siya pwedeng based on sa priority, no? So for example, in our case, we do parang vulnerability assessment and penetration testing every 6 months, or every time we launch something on production, it's important, no? Quarterly code reviews, those things. So pagka merong high severity dyan that you really need to, either na miss out siya, or it was a decision to design it that way at the start kasi nga you really want to launch faster, right? Or kaya ka nga umutang eh, di ba? Yun yung ipa-priority mo. So we tackle it that way with in UBX.
Yeah. So I think this is important to understand that CTOs are. That's why I said, I guess, CTOs are primarily a business role. Because how do you tackle tech debt? Is I'll be answering it from a business perspective, and let me give you an example. We launched several products slash startups in Symph, and I would say, like, a lot of times, a lot of these products fail. They're pretty consistent with a 90% startup failure rate,
Failure rate.
right? So we're not the exception, right? So a lot of these products fail, And one of my biggest regrets always is like, oh my gosh, if we just saved, we could have failed this faster. Like we could have failed this
Totoo
faster.
yan. Totoo yan. Oo.
And so almost of the time, so now what we've after that we've learned, and what I have, like for example with the products that we have now, is I give the engineers like the mandate where just launch. Like don't worry about like best practices yet if they take more time. Be conscious about it, but don't worry about it. Like our full priority is to get to a point where we can learn the lessons of how this product works in reality with users. But then there is a due date, as what Jerb was just saying. The moment we hit product market fit, there's no way we can scale without having done all those best practices. So now we have to pay the debt in full. So we do essentially like a rebuild. Like that's a cost, that's the risk. Like now you're like, okay, now your problem is a new problem, which is now you have customers knocking at your door, and they want the product fast, but now you have to delay a little bit because you gotta do our full rebuild, or else you will stumble down the line. So you have
Yeah.
to be aware of that you have to do like a rebuild. So you have a prototype phase where you just like avoid best practices, not because you avoid recesses period, but anything that takes more time, like what's the point of that if you just fail? You just wasted money. Right? 90% of
Yeah.
the time you will fail. So why optimize
Yeah.
for that
Failures.
for
For
the
the failure
failure?
rate.
So just like chances are you're gonna throw away this code anyway because you're gonna fail. So
Yeah.
just get to a point where like either fail faster and save money, or succeed and you're like, oh my gosh, nakachamba tayo, guys. Okay,
Let's
panic.
build it
Let's
na.
rebuild, invest, like like let's build
Oo.
this properly and hurry up. Like that's kind of like the philosophy that I have, at least in startup building. But if you
Yeah.
are building a product that you're actually going to roll out into an enterprise company, like has, and it's guaranteed that the success rate is pretty high if you build it right, and adoption will be there, then you can't do that kind of mindset, right? You can't like,
Mm.
right, because then you're gonna make your brand suffer, if you're gonna subject people to like announcements and then you're not gonna actually release. So you gotta build it almost right, almost the first time, right? It's kind of like that. So there's
Yeah.
it's case by case.
Tricky nga siya kasi like for you nga Bert no parang client base, and even for us like for example internal systems, but in general no we try to really ano reduce dependencies, right? Like if there's a dependency we would always decouple, and on the way there to decoupling, parang let's define nga the MVP. Ito talaga yung MVP kasi namin eh. I mean, some of those would be parang bells and whistles, and you wouldn't
Mm,
really necessarily have to want that, no? Or for example, like what you said nga kanina, you just really want to launch faster, no? So scalability may not be as important as the actual feature at the start, no? But this is probably where the architects or the tech leads who are really good are parang a cut above the rest siguro, no? Kasi meron siyang forward thinking na if ever this actually, you know, gain some traction, we kind of have a plan, or we've thought about it already, no? But you haven't built it, right? It's just
yeah.
we've reduced it to its most important parts, and that's the one that you release. And then the others is you would say na we would work on that. We're aware of that, but we'll work on that later. Kasi nga we can't afford to do that now. Kasi yun nga, we build a perfect system, but in 6 months time na nirelease natin, wala namang gumagamit, edi wala. Your hypothesis is bad. Whereas if you could have spent like a month or two, released it, got feedback, mas faster yung failure, and that 4 months you could actually do other things, diba? So
Yeah.
yun,
Like
yun.
I'm trying to think of an analogy. Maybe this is a bad analogy because it's like oil and it's like we're supposed to be like green, environment friendly. But I feel like
Okay.
running a startup or creating a new product, at least from a startup perspective, okay, where the failure rate is pretty high. It's like searching for oil, right? Imagine building a full oil platform and rig, and then you don't know that if there's oil there, just to explore, right? Like boo, and you're like, it's like this whole big thing that you built just for that, and it's like, oh, well, guys, it's no good there. So now we have to move to another place, and moving this whole thing is very expensive because it's huge, and it's like built for extracting oil, but there's no oil. So you move again, and it's so expensive, and you're out of money, and the project's dead. Rather, what you probably should do is you have like a specialized thing that you kind of like cobble up and build just to explore if there's something there. And once there's something there and you confirmed it, well, you're gonna fail a few times, right? Then you confirm that something's there. Then you're like, okay, guys, oh no, like we kind of messed up because like oil's coming out, and but now let's build the thing that we need to extract that.
Yeah.
And now you build it at that point. So yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the thing with startups. Like first
Yeah.
you cobble up something together to try to find out if it sticks, and if it usually doesn't stick right away. So when it does, then you're like, okay, guys, we found the actual thing that we want. Now let's build that
Yeah.
properly.
May naalala kong tatlong something that I'd like to share
True to
very
life
quickly.
stories. Go ahead.
Oo, parang ganon. I guess parang one of the things that John, no, our CEO, parang told me recently na, hey, sabi ko kasi, hey, we're launching this one pretty soon na, but, you know, the team and I have decided to, you know, put in some more work to it before we launch, no? And then he said, no, just launch and stop. Don't gold plate, no? Parang don't gold plate. We need to manage the cost of failure kasi, no? And that's the thing kasi that you really want to do here. You don't want to invest in something too much and then yun nga parang 6 months worth of effort, or like what Albert said, you built this, you know, big facility to dig for oil pero wala palang oil doon, 'di ba? So ang hirap, malaki yung cost for failure, whereas if the you know, you would have parang accumulated some technical debt, a healthy dose na to test out your value proposition faster, then maganda, di ba? The other thing is that it's not a real life parang story, but going back to first principles design, or what is your objective, right? So let's say you wouldn't want kasi to build or purchase a Lamborghini for a job or for an objective that can be fulfilled by a bicycle, right? So if you want to get from Pasig to, let's say, Makati, pwede ko naman mag-bike eh. Diba? Hindi naman kailangan mag-Lamborghini ka kaagad. Diba? So,
or jet plane.
Or jet plane, diba? But, you know, as you get to your objective, you would find out na, okay, there's a lot of things to improve, no? Parang, or even at the start pa nga, pwede mo sabihin na, actually, mas safe talaga if kotse, diba? Or maganda talaga if aircon, mabango, ganun, parang ganun, diba? So those things are good, right? And those things yung uutangin mo sa ngayon kasi you would leave that for later kasi you want to get to Makati faster, right? And pwede naman siyang gawin with a bike eh. So, yun yung naisip ko na second. The other one is, have you seen Bert, Three Idiots?
Yeah, I have.
It's a very good movie. So you guys should watch that actually. Yeah. Oh, great movie. Okay din siya for engineers, no? And you could probably relate. In one of the scenes there, parang sinabi kasi nung teacher, no? There's one guy that said na in space daw, like there's this invention of the space pen, right? And then nagtanong yung bida dun sa movie na, why do you need to invent a space pen? Diba? You could have, the job could be done with a pencil. Diba? So, which is tama, diba? You want something to write in space, and hindi kasi gumagana yung traditional ink ball pen, guys, kasi gravity, diba? Or no gravity. So, mahirap, diba? So, tama nga naman, no? Pwede nga gawin ng pencil, tama. But, there's actually more reasons to it, right? Na, if mababali daw yung pencil, it could, you know, harm,
go
to someone's eyes or the engines, for example. So, yeah, naisip ko lang yun din sa technical debt, no, na it's probably a job that a pencil can do, but, you know,
when you go to space, don't do the pencil anymore.
Oo, pwede sigurong ganon. Or be careful, I guess. Yun nga eh, parang you have risk kasi technical debt nga siya eh, diba? So you be careful na lang making, when you write something. Something like that. Yeah. I think that's a good question to end the episode with. Bert, sorry, you were gonna say something.
I was just gonna say, Kyle, like, thank you for asking that question because that was a good question to end this episode with.
Correct. All right. Yeah, I think this is where we pin. So thank you very much. I think we
we have had so many questions, and thank you so much for asking them. We would love to do this again. So if you have other questions that you want us to focus either like in one whole episode, just one question or one topic, feel free to let us know in the comments. This will really help us know what you guys want, so that we can give you and talk about, we can discuss, CTOs discuss what you want. And so yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys. If you like this episode, like the video,
And
follow our page na
subscribe.
rin.
I think this is also in YouTube. So
On Facebook and YouTube, please. So
yeah.
highly appreciated. As with the feedbacks that you're gonna give, if ever, on the comment section. Thank you once again. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
So you want to work in big tech companies like Google and Facebook, or create your own startup like Airbnb and Instagram? OmniQuotient is here to help. OmniQuotient is an online learning platform where you can learn something new from prominent developers every day while creating meaningful connections with them. Just go to omniquotient.com. Follow the topics that you want to learn and the developers you want to learn from. Share your tips and tricks in coding and interact with other developers. Join the OmniQuotient community today.